All right, let's take a look at section 6. Here's your focus question. The most significant political fight of the Jacksonian era was Jackson's campaign against the Bank of the United States, which to many represented the hopes and anxieties caused by the market revolution. While banking's growth had spurred economic development, many distrusted bankers as non-producers who gave nothing to the nation's real wealth and profited from the labor of others. Banks also tended to overissue paper money whose deterioration in value reduced the real income of wage earners. Jackson and others now thought that hard money, gold and silver, was the only honest currency. The aristocratic Nicholas Biddle directed the Bank of the United States, and he celebrated the bank's power to control America's financial system. This alarmed Democrats. In 1832, Biddle's allies persuaded Congress to extend the bank's charter for another 20 years, even though it was set to expire in 1836. Jackson saw this as blackmail since he believed the Bank of the United States would use its resources to defeat him in the 1832 election if he vetoed the bill. He did veto it, and his veto message resonated with popular values. He stated that Congress could not create an institution with such power and economic privilege unaccountable to voters. Exclusive privileges like the Bank of the United States Charter widened the gap between the wealthy and the humble farmers, mechanics, and laborers whom Jackson claimed to defend. The bank war allowed Jackson to enhance the power of the presidency. He was the first president to use the veto as a major weapon and directly address voters over the heads of Congress. Jackson's re-election in 1832 over Henry Clay, the Whig candidate, assured the demise of the Bank of the United States. What would replace the Bank of the United States? Jackson's veto was supported by two groups: state bankers who wanted to free themselves from Biddle's regulations and issue more paper currency, called soft money, and hard money advocates who opposed all banks, whether chartered by states or the federal government, and thought gold and silver were the only reliable currency. Jackson, wanting to dissolve the Bank of the United States before 1836, removed federal funds from the bank and deposited them in local state banks. Political and personal connections often determined the choice of which pet banks got federal funds. Without government deposits, the Bank of the United States lost its ability to regulate the state bank's activities. State banks issued more and more paper money to finance economic development. The value of banknotes in circulation skyrocketed from $10 million in 1833 to $149 million in 1837. Prices rose, real wages declined, and speculators prospered. The speculative bubble inevitably burst. The federal government sold 20 million acres of land in 1836, 10 times the 1830 amount, and almost all of it paid for in paper money, which had questionable value. In July 1836, Jackson issued the Specie Circular, mandating that land payments to the federal government be made in hard currency. Simultaneously, British banks demanded that their creditors pay them in hard currency, and a recession in Britain caused a drop in the demand for American cotton. Together, these events caused an economic crisis, the Panic of 1837, which was followed by a depression that lasted until 1843. Businesses failed, workers lost their jobs, and farmers and others lost their lands. States that had taken up economic development projects defaulted on their debts. Van Buren was not as popular as Jackson, and by 1840, the Whigs had mastered the political techniques Democrats had used to mobilize voters. That year, the Whigs nominated for president William Henry Harrison, a military hero from the War of 1812. He had no platform, but was portrayed as a common man who grew up in a log cabin and drank cider. His running mate was John Tyler, a states' rights Democrat from Virginia who had joined the Whigs after the nullification crisis. The Whigs sold their candidate much better than the Democrats did Van Buren, and with a record voter turnout of 80% of eligible voters, Harrison won a sweeping victory. But Harrison soon contracted pneumonia and died, making John Tyler an accidental president. When the Whig majority in Congress attempted to enact the American system into law, Tyler returned to his democratic principles and vetoed every measure, including a new national bank and a higher tariff. His cabinet resigned and the Whigs repudiated him. In the new age of Jacksonian democracy, presidents could not rule without parties, and Tyler accomplished little in his 4 years in office. But a storm was gathering that would test the stability of American democracy and the statesmanship of its political leaders. So that's our last section of Chapter 10. See you next time for Chapter 11.